I'm Tendor.
And this is Our Nation, news and analysis on the State of Tibet.
And today we wanted to focus on a day that's coming up. That's a very, very significant event in our history. February 13th, Centennial of Tibetan Independence Day. And before we get to that point, we actually wanted to go ahead with a couple of quick updates.
Yeah, as all Tibetans and supporters know, the crisis of self-immolations continues inside Tibet. The crisis of repression continues inside Tibet. And this year already, in the month of January alone, we've seen 3 self-immolations by Tibetans inside Tibet. We also saw a young man who died attempting to self-immolate. And of course, this brings the total now, official sort of total of Tibetans who've self-immolated in Tibet to 99, which is a shockingly, large number. And as I say that, I should, make sure to point out that there have been a number of cases of what we believe to have been self-immolations in Tibet that haven't been proven, or there was no real evidence that we could point to say that this is exactly what these individuals were trying to do. And so the number is likely even larger than 99. But I think that, for all of us to look inside Tibet and see the continued resistance and the determination and the incredible courage and bravery that Tibetans inside have displayed in street protests, in attempts to hold funeral processions and to do all of the proper funeral rites for these individuals, and just at every level the resistance continues. And so we must continue our work here in exile and around the world to bring an end to the Chinese occupation of Tibet as soon as possible.
And in terms of the crisis in Tibet and all the activities that the Tibet exile movement have been taking to alleviate this crisis, one of the important victories, actually bigger achievements, actually came late last year, and it was something that a lot of different organizations and individuals and communities worked together on. Many of you might remember that in December we were able to get 58 representatives in Congress to sign on to a historic letter to President Obama written by Jim McGovern and Frank Wolf, one Democrat and one Republican congressman in the U.S. House of Representatives. And this was clearly a huge achievement and milestone for the Tibet movement, but it wouldn't have been possible if so many of people out there, individuals like yourselves, at the same time many groups that came to work together on this truly made it possible in the end. And now moving into this year, in 2013, we would urge all of us to keep the pressure on President Obama and the White House. At the same time, this kind of push for a multilateral action on Tibet is being carried out in many other countries as well, in many different parliaments, many different governments. And these are efforts that we should really drive home this year by doubling, tripling our efforts, because the crisis is, it's come to a head, and many of the leaders around the world are aware of this, but at the same time, they will not make a move on the issue until we create the kind of pressure necessary. Yeah. And moving on to February 13th, which is coming up in a few days now, this is really, exciting occasion for Tibetans everywhere and our supporters, because we know that in February 13, 1913, Tibetans of another generation, they were in exile, and they were invaded by the Manchu troops at that time. The 13th Dalai Lama was also in exile at that time. But when things fell apart in the Manchu dynasty and their rule was shaken, Tibetans took advantage of that moment and expelled the Manchu troops from Tibet and declared Tibet once again an independent nation. And the 100th anniversary, the centennial of this moment, this proud moment when Tibetans once again declared Tibet a sovereign nation and took charge of their own country. That moment is coming up now on February 13th. It also falls on a Wednesday, Lakar, and the third day of Losar. And we are urging people to come out in the streets in various cities around the world, because we have to claim this day, we have to secure this day as our past achievement and shape our future in the vision of this past achievement. So we believe this day to be truly important, that something that everybody must participate in.
Yeah, this document is important for many different reasons, and I think, the most obvious is because it is our history. It is a fact. It is true. Tibet was an independent nation, and nothing the Chinese government says or does can change that. And that's something that we have to hold on to, and we have to promote. And we can never let them, despite their greatest attempts to do this over the last number of decades, we can never let them rewrite history. And actually, it's always been a great source of encouragement for me that His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, has always said this, in spite of his incredible attempts to find a mutually beneficial solution with the Chinese leadership, the Chinese government even today. His Holiness has always said that it is a fact. Tibet was a separate nation, and that is not something that can be changed just because the Chinese government demands His Holiness and other leaders to change it and to say Tibet was never independent. You simply can't do that. And that's always been a great source of encouragement for me. Also, as we see the Chinese government engaged in this soft power push, this strategy of promoting their soft power in the world right now. And I know one thing that's been extremely disturbing is to see Chinese news everywhere, and to see the China Daily, supplement in the Boston Globe and in Africa and in the New York Times, and the Chinese government is paying to bring out media that skews and twists the truth and history and the world views on the way that the world will look at China, but also the way the world will look at Tibet. And they have written so much and published so much in the attempt to change history. And so it's even more important that every single Tibetan, no matter what your political stance may be in our own, internal political movement, whether you're for, you believe that Tibet should be an independent nation again, or whether you believe that Tibet should be an autonomous region of China, whatever your position, it is our responsibility to make sure that history is observed, and that this fact and our truth of the independent history of the Tibetan nation, that we promote this and we share this with the world.
Yeah, and you mentioned soft power push that the Chinese government is engaging in these days, and I think everybody can notice that the Chinese government is actually really desperate for soft power around the world, and it drives them crazy to actually see that Tibetans have a lot more soft power than the Chinese government right now, and that's one of the main differences between today's Tibet and 1913 Tibet. Largely because of the work of His Holiness, and because of the way Tibetans have conducted themselves in many countries around the world, shown leadership in many of these fields. Everywhere around the world, among the global public, the Tibet movement and the Tibetan cause continues to enjoy so much soft power, and that's one of our advantages over China these days, and we should remember that as a strength. And then another discussion that we have had with people is some people asking questions about whether in 1913, when Tibet became an independent country, once again, whether it included certain parts of Eastern Tibet,
right.
And for those people, I would like to clarify and remind them to actually go back to this document from the Proclamation of Independence and read this document, because the answer is very, very clearly written in this document, and it shows it's talking about a Tibet that is a whole historical Tibet, including all of 3 provinces. And that vision of the 13th Dalai Lama is exactly the same vision of the 14th Dalai Lama that we hold today. So that's another thing to remember.
Yeah, and I think the other key to all of this is that, it's not to try to equate the two times and to say that, what was exactly as it was then, it could be now. It's actually, of course, a very different time. And in 1913, the 13th Dalai Lama and the Tibetan government officials that declared Tibet's independence, they seized that moment when the Manchu Empire was, the Manchus their power was waning, and they seized that moment to reassert Tibetan independence. And clearly right now China has a lot of power in the world, and the situation is not the same. But I think for us the key is this is our past. This is our history, and we must reclaim it, we must own it, and we must move forward with this document, with this truth as a source of strength for us and inspiration, and again, share it with the world and let it, help propel us forward in our mission, which is to end the suffering and to help restore freedom in our homeland.
And once again, for us, remembering the occasion and commemorating it is only half the plot.
Right.
The real part of this equation is the work going forward, and that's why we would like everybody to turn 2013 into a year of action for Tibet, a year of commemorating this historic event and dedicating ourselves to the cause of Tibet. And we urge everybody to take at least a few simple actions on February 13th. And one easy thing everybody must do, every Tibetan, every supporter must do, is to hoist a flag, a Tibetan flag, on their home, in their window, outside their apartment. Every Tibetan home and the home of our supporter should have a Tibetan flag flying proudly for the world to see. We also request you to organize community or public readings of this proclamation, and for people to hear the words out loud in Tibetan, in English, in various languages that we have put up on our website. These translations exist in more than a dozen languages now. So hold those readings in public, and hold flag-raising ceremonies in public. And we also encourage you to spend time in this month and in this year bringing this document, copies of this document, which you can download on the SFT website, print it and bring it to your elected officials. Present this to your mayor, to your congressman or senator, and local officials, and they might put it up in their office, frame it and put it on their wall. So these are actions that we can take. We have been working with a number of different organizations, including TYC and Tibet Network and many local communities, and working on how we can take this and turn it into campaigns and actions for Tibet. And these are the ways in which we can, we spent last year educating our own movement and public about this occasion. And this year, let's use this moment to educate the global public and get elected officials to recognize the fact that Tibet was an independent country. And we hope this might be eventually a stepping stone to greater political gains in the future. And we hope, much like the Great 13th was able to return to Tibet and live in a free Tibet in his lifetime, we hope and believe that the Great 14th will also reunite in a free Tibet with all of us exiles once again in Tibet with our brothers and sisters.
So that's Our Nation News and Analysis on the State of Tibet. Thanks for joining.